Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, happy VD Day. Happy Valentine's Day, all you lovers out there, and all of those of you who are like me, bitter and alone. But I'm here to push you through an early Sports Frenzy 2.0, taping here late on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, 2023. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Dave and I warned you last week we're going to have to do things a little bit differently this week. He and I are going to see Alter Bridge, Mammoth, WVH, and Red on our normal taping day. So you get me a little bit early, solo. And that's okay because I don't foresee a lot of stuff coming up here in the next 24 hours that would have made things all that much different. We still get to talk a lot about Super Bowl 57. That'll probably take about half of the show here. So let's get into it. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs win Super Bowl 57, 38-35. You can feel how you want about the game. I will say that right out front, first and foremost. I personally have no problems with Kansas City winning the game, but this whole debate about calling defensive holding there at the end, and of course, in our fractured society, we've got 50% on one side, 50% on the other side. People in Philadelphia overturning cars, destroying their flat screen televisions. And I don't care if James Bradbury comes out and says, yeah, I held the receiver. I believe it was Juju Smith-Schuster. I fall more on the side of let the players play the game. I thought Greg Olsen in the Fox booth did a fantastic job in saying, I just don't think you call that. And of course, there's people out there, as I said, everybody's got their opinion. I agree with Greg Olsen that you don't make that call. Now, I don't think you make that call ever in any game because there was not that much in terms of impeding the receiver. This is all kind of going back to you can call offensive holding on every play if you wanted to. And we can criticize the officials, criticize the job they've done in this postseason or for this entire year. We've got Roger Goodell coming out saying, oh, the referees are doing an amazing job. The officiating crews have never been better, which is a load of BS. The problem is we have never been able to figure out how to use instant replay, how to get full-time referees versus part-time referees and officials. I would not have made the call. I would have let Kansas City kick the field goal and given the Eagles time to come back and try to tie or win the game. And a lot of people who know me know I had the Eagles, so maybe I'm biased in that respect. But again, I say in the end, I don't have a problem with Kansas City winning this game because they made no mistakes. They played a near flawless game, in my opinion. Patrick Mahomes wins MVP, 21-27, 182 yards passing, 3 TD passes. also had a couple big runs, overall ran for 44 yards. Now, Jalen Hurts was called upon to do more. I would not have had a problem if, for once, I think this happened decades ago, but for once in recent memory, if they had voted the losing quarterback in as the MVP, because Jalen Hurts played, in my opinion, a phenomenal game. And I'm not an Eagles fan. I'm not a Chiefs fan. You guys know I'm coming from the bottom of the barrel here as a Bears fan and a Bucks fan. But I just think there was something wrong with that last call. It kind of reminded me of the Steelers and the Seahawks, where it seemed like all the calls went against the Seahawks, went for the Steelers, trying to get Bill Cowher his one Super Bowl ring. I can't stand it when the officials get involved in big games. You got people out there, again, as we talk about this and discuss this topic, people out there who say, well, if you're going to call it in week 3 of the regular season, you've got to call it in the Super Bowl. I just told you, I don't think I would have called that defensive holding in week 3. At some point, you've got to let these guys play. If we don't give the defense a chance to man up and stop some of these plays, we're going to be looking at pinball machine games. I mean, we're going to be looking at 40, 50, 60-point games on a consistent basis in the NFL. If you do not let the defense, let them be able to do something. If you're not going to call holding on the offensive line, but you're going to call defensive holding all the time on ticky-tack stuff like this on James Bradbury, then we are looking at the escalation of the NFL becoming what the NBA is now. No defense. The NBA, of course, now 130, 140-point games, commonplace, par for the course. And most people I know think the NBA is right now an inferior product. I don't care what ESPN says the ratings are like. Speaking of the NBA, by the way, I am so glad, so glad Kadarius Toney did not win the MVP. I was scared to death after he had the big punt return right after scoring a touchdown that he was going to be MVP. Kadarius Toney is the poster child for now the NFL player becoming the NBA player, where Kadarius Toney worked his way out of the New York Giants camp after less than 2 years being a number 1 first-round pick. Not number 1 overall, obviously, but a first-round pick. By being lazy, by always being hurt, always being injured, caring more about his rap career than the team. And now he has a Super Bowl ring and came very damn close to becoming Super Bowl MVP. And that disgusts me. I've talked about this with another New York player, this time on the Giants, Kayvon Thibodeau, when he was drafted in the top 10 by the Giants this past year. And all he could talk about was how this enhances his brand. Nobody is begrudging anybody the chance to make money, but it's gotten way out of control. And Kadarius Toney and Kayvon Thibodeau are the equivalent of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving without the rings and without the hundreds of millions of dollars already in the bank. We'll get more on that later on. Now, of course, the two key reasons why the Eagles lost, in my opinion, and I, again, thought Jalen Hurts played an unbelievable game. He made one mistake, and I feel so bad for him because he made the one mistake. You're up against Patrick Mahomes, right now currently the best quarterback in the NFL, arguably already creeping into the top 10 all time. You can't make mistakes against Patrick Mahomes. And I don't want to hear about Andy Reid. I'll get to that later. But Jalen Hurts had that fumble, loses the ball in the first half when the Eagles are controlling the game, controlling the clock, time of possession. He fumbles the ball. The Chiefs bring it back for a touchdown on defense. And then all of a sudden you kind of go, oh, you know that's going to come back and bite Philadelphia in the ass. And it sure enough did. And then, of course, the second key point was the defensive holding at the end of the game, which I still think was garbage. But again, Kansas City didn't make the mistakes. The Eagles only made a few. You can argue the only mistake Kansas City made was missing a field goal. Harrison Butker misses a field goal in the first half to keep Philadelphia's momentum alive. This is basically a tale of two halves. Philadelphia won the first half, but Kansas City won the second half and ultimately won the game. Now, I did not like a lot of the things the Chiefs did. I am not a fan of Andy Reid. I don't understand why the media just kisses this guy's ass. Oh, I want a cheeseburger. I got to get a cheeseburger. How about we talk about you letting your son drink his ass off in the Kansas City Chiefs facility and destroying a young girl's life when he leaves drunk and smashes into her family's car? But nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. Oh, Andy Reid's such a lovable, wonderful guy. He condoned it. He allowed it because it happened in the Kansas City Chiefs facility. So I say to hell with Andy Reid, to hell with the Walrus, to hell with his cheeseburger-loving mug. And then, of course, he's got to be arrogant and cocky with that whole ring around the rosy play that they pulled out in the second half when momentum had clearly swung from Philadelphia over to the Chiefs. I don't like Andy Reid. You can say he's a great head coach, and he is. You can't argue with 2 Super Bowl wins, 4 overall appearances with 2 different teams. I can't argue with those numbers, but I can sure as hell say I think the guy is scamming everybody. I think he is a bad, bad human being. Bad human being. And I'll be the one to take the hit and be called the bad guy because I'll be the one to call him out. Where the media out there, Fox, ESPN, NFL Network won't say a damn thing about it, I will. His son drank probably right in front of his father to the point of inebriation, got in a car on Kansas City Chiefs property, drove away, and destroyed a young girl's life. I will never, ever, ever let Andy Reid or the Chiefs forgive that or forget that. They wrote a check and they said, let's make it go away. And Roger Goodell is just as culpable because he loves to punish players when he sees fit. if it's not a big star, if it's not somebody that's going to drop their ratings in a Super Bowl or a big Monday night football game. But Andy Reid's son, oh no, brush it under the carpet. Sweep it under the rug. Now, the field in Arizona was abysmal. At least I hate to see field conditions like that because of the injury risk to the players, but at least you can say it was the same for both sides. Unlike officiating, they both had to play on that awful, terrible field. But again, the injury risk, I can't believe they're having that kind of problem with the turf down in Arizona. And of course, they've got the stadium where they can pull the grass out like a big tray, get it sun when it needs to, water it inside when it needs to be watered. And of course, people are ripping on everything or loving everything that was ancillary to the game itself. Nick Sirianni crying at the national anthem. So what? I appreciate the true emotion. For a minute, we didn't have to put up with political correctness and PC garbage, which the NFL still is trying to shove down our throats. Now, if you want to listen to my criticisms of the advertisements and the halftime show, check out the weekend edition. I'm going to save most of that for the weekend edition. But I will say, going back to the PC stuff, when it comes to the pre-show, some of the NFL sponsored ads, the whole thing about women who are driving football forward, showing the whole flag football thing with the young girl. Just stop. Okay? Just stop. It's going too far again. Just like everything else in the society, you're going too far. Nobody is trying to denigrate or debase women just because football is a male sport. But you're pushing it and you're pushing it and you're pushing it. Of course, we have to point out that the jet flyover at the kickoff was all women. Fine. But I'm tired of this. I am just tired of the fact that women who do not play the sport, they are not physically capable of playing the sport to the level of men. We have to keep acknowledging them, and we have to say, oh, everybody wears pink in this month. Breast cancer awareness more important than prostate cancer awareness. We have become a very sick society with how we are slanting everything. We saw a McDonald's commercial that was just so over the top PC. It was pathetic. A Disney advertisement about their 100th anniversary that was just over the top PC. Disgusting. Thank God most of the ads outside of those I've just mentioned stayed away from that stuff. I found the ads this year to be better than probably the last 5 or 6 years. There were a lot of highlights, a couple lowlights. The thing that I find amazing is that when you listen to other people's opinions about the advertisements, I mean, it's all over the map. The stuff that I loved, I hear other people saying they hated, vice versa. You're getting different takes, different opinions. Doesn't matter if you're talking to one person, 10 people, 100 people, it's all scattered. So I guess in that sense, the advertisers did a phenomenal job in that all the ads seem to appeal to somebody on some level at some point. And by the way, I am sick and tired of Tony Romo and Snoop Dogg, who seem to appear in every other commercial. If those are the two great spokesmen for your company, I'm sorry, you're in a world of hurt. All right, so once again, Super Bowl 57 is over. Kansas City wins their second Super Bowl here in the last few years, their third overall. We're going to talk real quick about NFL news. I'm going to save my discussion of the current class of Hall of Famers and the NFL awards for the past season until segment 2. First up, breaking news here as I tape this within the last couple hours here on February the 14th. Derek Carr has been officially released by the Las Vegas Raiders. So now he is actually, in my opinion, in great shape compared to all these other quarterbacks, whether they be free agents, whether they be guys who want to get traded, a la Mr. Darkness Retreat, Aaron Rodgers. Whereas now Derek Carr probably has a week or two. I know he's probably got a full month, but he doesn't want to make an impetuous, quick decision. He also does not want to drag it out and start letting these other players come into the mix. Right now, Derek Carr is in the catbird seat. He can pick and choose whatever team he wants. Because of the fact he was released, he does not have to wait until the new league year starts. We've heard Carolina. We've heard the Saints. We've heard the Jets. I wonder about the Saints because the Saints were the one team that actually supposedly had agreed to a trade with the Raiders, but it sounds like Derek Carr nixed that whole deal in terms of he couldn't come to agreement with the Saints on a compensation package, or he didn't want to go to the Saints. So I think you take the Saints off the table. I could be wrong, but I think you take the Saints off the table. So I think you're looking at him going to Carolina with Frank Reich or the Jets. Now, the Jets is going to be an interesting scenario because we've talked about the last few weeks. They want Aaron Rodgers. A lot of their fan base, people in the media in New York think Aaron Rodgers is the guy. The owner has come out and said he knows he's got to get a quarterback. So do you wait and see if you can get Aaron Rodgers, or do you take the second best quarterback on the market, knowing you can get him now without having to give up any draft pick compensation? I personally don't want Aaron Rodgers. You guys know I'm a Bears fan. I'm bitter. But at the same time, if I could take my Bears fandom out of the equation, I think Aaron Rodgers is a nut job and a flake. He's the NFL's version of Kyrie Irving. I do not want him. Do not want him. All right, wrapping up segment 1 here. We've got our final 2 new head coaches here after the Super Bowl. The last 2 slots, the Colts and the Cardinals, have been filled, and they are both filled by Philadelphia Eagles coordinators. I find this very intriguing. So the Colts go with Philly offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. Again, young coordinator seems to be the thing, the hot commodity now for the most part. Instead of recycling the older head coaches, which I'm fine with. And you can't really say anything bad about Shane Steichen, I'm sorry. The way he's guided that offense and the way he has developed Jalen Hurts. I just wonder, here's my question. Given what he had with Jalen Hurts, does this mean the Colts are going to trade up? And you could see Irsay trading up, selling the farm to get one of these two young mobile quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, of course, and Bryce Young. Because I can't see them settling for a old drop back pocket quarterback like a Jimmy Garoppolo. So if you're a Bears fan like me out there, this brings you hope that the Colts will hopefully overpay, get in a bidding war to get that number one pick and get that mobile young quarterback who would fit the Jalen Hurts mold that Shane Steichen is used to working with here over the past year or two. Now, this one is interesting. Now, the Cardinals were, by all accounts, the least attractive job out there, the least attractive opening. You don't know when Kyler Murray is going to be available. He's a prima donna. Supposedly, he was going to have input on this decision. I can't see it in this case. Why would he want the Philadelphia defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon? Now, again, this was the least attractive opening of all of the, I believe, 5 that we had out there. And you just saw a point that I forgot to mention when we were talking about the Super Bowl. You just saw the Philadelphia Eagles defense whiff big time in the Super Bowl. This vaunted, awesome defense that was going to break the Bears record for total sacks in a season, regular season and playoffs combined, couldn't get to Patrick Mahomes on a bad ankle once. One of the worst performances for a supposedly vaunted fantastic unit, whether it's offense or defense, in Super Bowl history. And that falls on Jonathan Gannon. Yet the Cardinals decide the regular season and the early playoff performances from that defense were enough. So Jonathan Gannon will be the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals. In terms of coordinator moves, Baltimore brings in their new offensive coordinator from the Georgia Bulldogs. Todd Monken will now be in charge of the offense for John Harbaugh and the Ravens. But the question is, will he be running an offense with Lamar Jackson or somebody else? And again, I've got a question. What kind of success will he have based on what we saw with Georgia and the kind of offense he'll have to run with Lamar Jackson? Then finally, the Texans fill out their coaching staff after hiring DeMeco Ryans. Bobby Slowick coming in from San Francisco as well. He was their passing coordinator. He will now be the OC for the Texans. Matt Burke will come in and take over the defense, but we know DeMeco Ryans will have a say. Hang on for just a sec, kids. One promo, segment 2 coming next. Are you having trouble falling asleep behind the wheel of your expensive SUV? Are you finding difficulty in avoiding golf clubs thrown at you by your angry wife as you pull out of the driveway? Sign up today for the Tiger Woods Driving School, sponsored by Sports Frenzy 2.0. We'll show you how to text ladies of the night while still driving effectively in the wee hours of the morning. We'll also teach you how to ditch a suspicious backpack when you end up driving into a ditch. Check out Sports Frenzy 2.0 on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, for updates on our latest classes, including how to curse and swear in front of uptight golf fans and their children and still be adored by millions. The Tiger Woods Driving School. It's great. All right, everybody, welcome back. Sports Frenzy 2.0, episode 7 of 2023, a day early for you. Maybe a day and a half. We like to advertise Thursday morning, but we usually drop our episodes late Wednesday night. So you're getting one here on VD Day. Happy Valentine's Day. Hope you and your loved one catch it. No, not VD, love, right? That's the whole thing, love. All right, a couple quick notes here on the Super Bowl before I move on to the Hall of Fame and the 2022-23 awards winners for the NFL. Super Bowl 57 ended up being a phenomenal hit for Fox. Third most watched television program ever, with 113 million viewers. So I guess it doesn't matter if we've got bad officiating. It was a great matchup between the two top seeds. It was a great game up until the very end. Football reigns supreme. It's still the best sport out there. Take note, baseball and basketball. Now, there was a debate going back and forth about whether the president would show up for a pregame interview. Of course, I am no fan of Joe Biden. I think he's already proven to be the most incompetent president of all time. Almost said head coach. Head coach of America. But he was going to do an interview with Fox Soul. Not Fox. Fox Soul. In a blatant pandering move to try to appeal to one particular constituency. Again, more PC creeping into our sports when they just need to leave it alone and keep it away. Thankfully, we didn't have to deal with Mr. I can't even read off a teleprompter without making a fool of myself. So, in a very rare occasion, we did not get the president doing a pregame interview. Now, one of the things, I picked the Eagles to win. We've talked about that already. But when I picked the Eagles, I didn't even know that defensive guru Vic Fangio had signed a 2-week deal before taking over as the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. Fangio had signed a 2-week deal to help out the Eagles on, again, what was already considered a phenomenal defense. And we talked about how Jonathan Gannon has parlayed his success with the Philly defense into a head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals. God help him. But how could I not feel better about my pick after hearing about Vic Fangio coming in to help with the defense? Well, something went amiss. Something went wrong. I don't know if it's because there were too many people now involved bringing in Fangio, but how do you have Vic Fangio, arguably one of the top 2 or 3 defensive minds in the NFL, coming in to help already a phenomenal defense, and they fall flat and they cannot do anything to stop the Kansas City Chiefs? The only thing that kept the Kansas City Chiefs in check was the Eagles possessing the ball longer, trying to keep the ball away from Kansas City, which of course worked for about 2 to 2.5 quarters. So good luck to Miami. If that's what you're going to get out of Vic Fangio, good luck to Arizona. If that's what you're going to get out of Jonathan Gannon, oh boy. All right. The 2022-2023 NFL awards. Not really much to complain about here. I think they usually do a pretty good job here. The AP does. Of course, now they've made this a big extravaganza. We put it on TV either the night before or a couple nights before the Super Bowl. The NFL honors. Of course, Patrick Mahomes wins MVP. That would actually be the one that I would have the most problem with, just because I thought Justin Jefferson was the MVP of the league. Now, he won Offensive Player of the Year, which you kind of see the NFL and the AP give out to that non-quarterback position to say, yeah, we know you were really, really good, but we've got to give the MVP to a quarterback because they're just more important and more special. Now, I don't think Jefferson's performances in the last couple of weeks of the regular season helped, especially the one where he got completely shut down against the Packers. But I can't argue with Mahomes to a point, but we have got to stop giving these awards just to quarterbacks. It demeans and degrades all the other positions. I thought last year Cooper Kupp was by far the MVP of the league, and this year I thought it was Justin Jefferson. There were years back, 2, 3, 4 years back, where I would have gone with Derrick Henry. But again, it's Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, Tom Brady. I know it's almost impossible to give it to an offensive lineman, nearly as impossible to give it to a defensive player, but we have got to get over that. The media has got to get over that, and they have got to start looking at positions other than quarterback. Defensive Player of the Year. Early on, we thought it was going to be Micah Parsons from the Cowboys, but he kind of faded a bit down the stretch, so it ends up going to Nick Bosa of the 49ers. The Jets fans are ecstatic. New York fans are ecstatic. The Jets get Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year. Garrett Wilson, wide receiver. Sauce Gardner, cornerback. Now why don't you do something with it? Tells me that you've got a great general manager in Joe Douglas. Makes me wonder about Robert Saleh as a head coach. And this is why the Jets are desperate to get a solid veteran quarterback presence in camp, because we all know the disaster the abject disaster that Zach Wilson has become. And of course, Brian Daboll of the Giants, sticking with New York, well-deserved coach of the year. I completely concur with that. I'll be interested to see if he can keep it up, though. We've seen a lot of guys get coach of the year. They come in, they lend a new voice, give some energy to a moribund franchise. And then a year or two down the road, things fall apart because it doesn't last. You can't sustain it unless you've got the front office helping you out, bringing in good players from the draft, good free agents, mature leaders. Not Kadarius Toney and not Kayvon Thibodeau. Then, of course, comeback player of the year was Geno Smith. Again, an easy call. Good time to have a comeback year. Geno has earned himself a lot of money. I imagine Pete Carroll's going to keep him around in Seattle. Seattle was supposed to be awful this past year and ended up making the playoffs. If it wasn't for Brian Daboll, I would say Pete Carroll should have been coach of the year. So while I had very few issues with the AP awards, the NFL honors, I have a lot of problems with the Hall of Fame class. And if you guys listen to the weekend edition, you know I have problems with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And my problems with these Halls of Fame, if you're passionate about the sport, if you're passionate about the music, you're always going to be disappointed. But it always goes way too far for the snobs, for the morons who are voting for these Halls of Fame. We've seen it in baseball. They won't put the steroid guys in. They won't put Pete Rose in, even though there are 5 or 6 players right there. Rose, A-Rod, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, who need to be in the Hall of Fame now. But because of cheating allegations, gambling allegations, will never get in, but they're fine with putting in Scott Rowland. And the NFL is turning out to be no different, even though the NFL is almost the opposite in terms of their inclusivity, as opposed to the Baseball Hall of Fame's exclusivity. 9 players or contributors get into the Hall of Fame this year. And of course, that's pretty much par for the course. You get 5 players voted in, and then, of course, the Veterans Committee can step in and vote in contributors or coaches, GMs, owners, or players who were passed over in the first round of eligibility. And we see that now with baseball, of course. Fred McGriff being the most recent example. Number one, again, I'm biased here. I'm biased. And given the fact they take so many players in every year, he'll eventually get in. But how do you not put Devin Hester in the Football Hall of Fame, but you put in Zach Thomas? Really? Zach Thomas? And I know everybody thought Joe Thomas was a no-brainer, but Joe Thomas, okay, great. He was an awesome offensive lineman on a terrible, terrible team. So what did he really do to make his team better? What did he really do? to make his team great. You could say the same thing about Tony Baselli, who got in, I believe, last year. I know you got to acknowledge the offensive linemen. Of course, you've got to. Guys like Anthony Munoz, we all know, were phenomenal. Most of the offensive line for the 70s Pittsburgh Steelers or the early 90s Dallas Cowboys, my God, you cannot deny the fact that they should all be in the Hall of Fame, but this kind of stuff just drives me insane. Joe Thomas wins nothing outside of, oh, we're going to have to put a Cleveland Brown on the All-Pro team. Let's make Joe Thomas our pick again this year. Now, you got guys like Darrelle Revis, obviously a Hall of Famer. One of the best cornerbacks I've seen. Now, personally, again, as I'm upset about Devin Hester not making the Hall of Fame, I'm happy that my Buccaneer man, Bronde Barber, makes it in. Also happy to see the Veterans Committee, whatever you want to call them, put in Joe Klecko from the Jets. I remember Mark Gastineau and Joe Klecko just being a dominant defensive force for the Jets. And of course, as a coach, Don Coryell putting together that Air Coryell offense with the Chargers, Dan Fouts, right? Charlie Joyner, Kellen Winslow, just a great, great dynamic team that fell just short to the Dolphins in one of the greatest games of all time. But again, we don't have to let everybody in. Let's stop with the participation trophy mentality. Okay, kids? Maybe it's just me. You guys drop me a line wherever you listen to this podcast, whether it be Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Audible, or you can check out the Facebook page and let me know what you think there. But I just think when it comes to a Hall of Fame, exclusivity is better than inclusivity. I'd rather leave the marginals out when it comes to musicians, football players, baseball players, than let the marginal ones in that degrade and debase the entire idea of the Hall of Fame. Again, to me, Zach Thomas doesn't have any business being in the same Hall of Fame as Walter Payton. That's just me. All right. So we bid adieu to the NFL season. The football season is officially over now. So what are we to do? I know pitchers and catchers are getting ready to report Arizona and Florida to get the whole spring training thing going. I'm already hearing awful, awful news from baseball, which we'll get to in our third segment. But, you know what's going to ease your mind? What's going to get you through until we finally say play ball at Wrigley Field or at Yankee Stadium or at Dodger Stadium? It's going to be NASCAR. It is going to be the Cup Series. your preeminent racing league, division, whatever you want to call it. Now, while I don't have a lot to talk about in terms of news leading into this Sunday's Daytona 500, of course, qualifying is tomorrow night. As I tape here on the 14th, qualifying for the top two positions will take place on the 15th, and then the night after that, Thursday night, the 16th, are the duels. Of course, Daytona, very unique qualifying situation. And then this Sunday, the Great American Race, February the 19th, 2023, NASCAR, the Cup Series always starts off with their biggest race. They do it backwards from every other league, every other sport. The Daytona 500 will be this Sunday. And of course, next week, Dave will be back with me. We'll recap everything that happened down in Florida. But we talked about our Facebook page. You will now find our NASCAR Cup picks each and every week as opposed to our football picks since there is no more NFL. And I'm sorry, we're not doing XFL and USFL picks. Sorry to break your heart. But it is Valentine's Day, so I'm sure there's a lot of that going around out there right now. Our 8 panelists here on Sports Frenzy have got their picks in for the Daytona 500, so let's go through them, shall we? We'll start off with our defending champion, Aaron, the Big Easy, along with my absent podcast partner, the Conquistador, Dave Height. Aaron and Dave take Austin Dillon as their pick to win the Daytona 500. Next up, the Big Blue W and I are going with Ryan Blaney. Sam, the elder statesman, the governor, Doug. Very good pick here. But again, our rules state that you only get to pick a driver 3 times over the first 26 races. So even though I think it's a great pick, I got to save him for later. But Sam and Doug are taking Denny Hamlin for the 500. Now that leaves 2 picks left. The juggler, Nick, will go again, a pick that I would not burn given our limits on the Daytona 500, but not a bad pick. Chase Elliott for Nick. And then finally, Mrs. C. Been performing very, very well in the Frenzy Cup competition here on Sports Frenzy 2.0 over the last few years. She is going with, you know him, you love him. I do believe he won the race last year. That would be one Austin Cindric. So there you go, kids. Those are our picks for the Daytona 500. Check back each and every week. Wednesday night, Thursday morning, new episodes of Sports Frenzy 2.0. We will give you our picks for the upcoming weekend's Cup race. Now, since I mentioned our competition starting up here for 2023 into 2024, we always start off with what we call the Frenzy Cup, which is NASCAR, the Cup Series. But what happened to last year, 2022-2023? Well, it was a very, very, very tight contest at the end. It came all the way down to Super Bowl 57. Regretfully, I got the short end of the stick. My own fault. I picked the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. And that one incorrect pick cost me not only our trophy for football picks, both college and pro, which we call the Rick Shaggy Brooks Memorial Trophy, because by losing that game and the Big Blue W, winning it with Kansas City, we ended up tied through 400 picks. But we do tiebreakers. You guys, if you go back to August, September, you could listen to an earlier podcast where we told you who we picked for our tiebreakers for college and for the pros. And Bill had it right. Bill had Patrick Mahomes as the MVP of the league. He also had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, the only one of the 8 of us to do that. So he wins the tiebreaker. He wins the Rick Shaggy Brooks Memorial Trophy, knocking me to second. And that, like cruel, cruel dominoes falling and destroying any hopes or chances or dreams I had of winning our overall championship, the Penta Frenzy. Aaron, the Big Easy, ends up winning our 2022-2023 overall Penta Frenzy championship by half a point over me, the Maestro. So congratulations to the Big Easy, Aaron. Second time he's won it in the last 3 years, so good to have some competition, good to have some people outside, of course, the great, the glorious Maestro, winning our year-long competition. And I've already sent out emails to all of our panel members. I'm trying to get the 3 who have never won the Penta Frenzy to step it up. The Conquistador, shockingly, has never won the Penta Frenzy. Mrs. C and Doug, the Governor. Nick, Aaron, Bill, Sam, and myself have all at some point in time won the prestigious Penta Frenzy, the greatest award in inconsequential sports podcasting competitions. So there you go. 1 year ends and another begins with the Daytona 500. Now, Dave's not here. Not really a big need to talk about hockey, but I will point out for him that the Blackhawks, his favorite team, are 16, 30, and 5 as I tape on Valentine's Day. Still barely staying out of the last place overall slot in the NHL. I believe the Columbus Blue Jackets are still slightly worse. But I think the big news that I need to address is that, of course, the dynamic duo for the Blackhawks, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, rumors are that they are going to be dealt before the trade deadline. And Patrick Kane, I found this a little shocking, went on record as saying he was unhappy when the New York Rangers traded for Vladimir Tarasenko because he wanted to actually get traded to the Rangers, as the Rangers are emerging as a viable threat for the Stanley Cup this year. Of course, Patrick Kane and I'm sure Jonathan Toews want to play for winners if they get traded. So we will see what happens with the Blackhawks as they enter into what I've got to believe is a massive rebuild. But again, 3 Stanley Cups, can't argue with the results. College basketball here to wrap up segment 2. Alabama is now your number one team in basketball. Number one in the AP poll for the first time in, I believe, 20 years, as Purdue fell to Northwestern. The teams that Dave and I root for, of course, Notre Dame for him. Mike Bray's last year still not stepping up to the plate for him. 10-15 as I tape. The Miami Hurricanes on the flip side looking good. Just beat North Carolina last night. They are currently 15th in the AP poll at 21-5. And finally, bad, sad, terrible news. New Mexico State has shut down their men's basketball program for the rest of the season because of horrific charges of hazing among the players. Hazing is something I cannot condone or stand. Bullying, it's disgusting. And good for New Mexico State to say enough's enough. And that's enough for us in segment 2. Quick promo. I'll be back to wrap things up. Feeling mildly fatigued? Need a day off even if you just took one a few days ago? Make $30 million a year but just don't want to work for it? You need to join the NBA Load Management Club right now. When they're not napping or texting, guest lecturers Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving will describe foolproof ways to earn tens of thousands of dollars by not doing anything. Sports Frenzy 2.0, available on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, is currently negotiating with LeBron James to bring his popular How to Make the Hall of Fame Without Really Trying webinar live and in person to the Load Management Club. Thanks again to Sports Frenzy 2.0 and all you apathetic fans out there for making us a success. All right, everybody, welcome back to the final segment here, Sports Frenzy 2.0. The Maestro flying solo, of course, rock and roll takes precedence, so Dave and I, on our normal taping day, are going to see Alter Bridge, Mammoth, WVH, and Red. So we're putting this out a day early. Valentine's Day, February the 14th, 2023. Of course, glad to have you aboard. Now, we talked a lot about the Super Bowl, but we're not done yet. Check out the weekend edition this Saturday morning, February the 18th, where I will discuss the Super Bowl halftime show with Rihanna, as well as the best and the worst of the advertisements, including the movie trailers. So you don't want to miss that. But we've got to wrap up the sports news of the week. I alluded to the fact I needed to talk about baseball because this is not the game that I grew up with. Over the last year or so, I have complained. I don't like how my team, the Cubs, sold out to Bally Sports and the Marquee Network and are trying to gouge fans for $20 a month to watch the Cubs games. I have not liked some of the rule changes. Some are okay. Some I find to be over the top and unnecessary, as Rob Manfred, arguably the worst commissioner in major sports today in America, tries desperately to grab onto a younger demographic by making the game higher scoring, move along faster, more TV friendly, whatever you want to say. This is one rule change that they have made permanent that I initially thought rumblings, rumors were about 6 months ago. I thought they were going to get rid of this and go back to the old school way of playing extra inning baseball. Well, it turns out they will not. Baseball in the regular season has now made it permanent that if they go to extra innings in a regular season game, there will be a runner starting on second base from the 10th inning on. I hate this rule so much. And of course, this came out of the COVID era. And of course, God forbid, we don't want to tax the pitchers. We don't want to tax the bullpens. We want to speed the games up. We don't need 17, 18 inning games. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then I'm hearing people are starting to get their first look at the new bases. Of course, they've made the bases bigger, trying to make it easier for stolen bases, for base runners to not get thrown out. Pizza boxes is the description that I saw today for the new bases. That's great. Now, the pitch clock, I don't have a problem with. The shift restrictions, I don't have a problem with. Some purists would disagree with me. But again, I would go back to the old school way of thinking when it comes to football, where you can only have a certain number of guys on the line of scrimmage. So what's wrong with telling baseball players you can only have a certain number of players on the left side or the right side of second base? That's how I look at it. Couple of contract extensions. I never liked the fact the Cubs traded away Yu Darvish. He was too young. But of course, when the Cubs decided to blow the team up, Yu Darvish unfortunately got caught up in the fallout, goes to the Padres, and the Padres have liked what they've gotten from him so far so much that they signed him to a bargain deal. A bargain deal. There's no way, shape, or form you could argue that the Cubs could not have afforded this kind of extension if they had held on to Yu Darvish. 6 years, $108 million extension with the Padres for Yu Darvish. Yes, kids, you do the math. That's less than $20 million a year for a top-line pitcher. Now, I'm sure maybe Yu Darvish wanted to stay on the West Coast. We all know that the Asian American community is very, very important to the West Coast clubs. But again, just breaks my heart that the Cubs couldn't figure out a way to make this work with Yu Darvish. If they'd held on to him, would he have accepted this type of deal from the Cubs? And we get Marcus Stroman. Yay. Oh, and Jameson Taillon. Double yay. And we still have no bullpen. And then the Astros, of course, are just so smart. The Astros and the Braves, the two smartest organizations in Major League Baseball, locking up young players. They realize you've got to lock these players up. Yes, you're buying out arbitration years, but you're also making sure that you don't have to give them an Aaron Judge type contract down the road. Christian Javier, their young, stellar starting pitcher, gets a 5-year, $64 million contract. Again, ridiculously affordable. It's amazing how we don't have smarter people in baseball, like the guys running the Astros and the Braves. And then finally, Mr. Personality, Derek Jeter, is going to be joining the Fox studio crew this year. I'm sorry, I think Derek Jeter is one of the most overblown, overvalued, overrated players of all time. This is similar to me to the whole Tom Brady coming into the Fox booth ostensibly in 2024 for football. It seems like the best guys for the job are the ones who are not the top tier MVP caliber players, but guys like Greg Olson, the second tier guys, who ended up figuring out or having a better personality or knowing how to project their thoughts, their opinions, their analysis in a better way than just the quote unquote name player. Think about Dan Marino. Think about Joe Montana. Think about Drew Brees in football. And that's what I'm getting with Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter is going to make Alex Rodriguez look like John Madden. Sorry, the captain. Again, another arrogant New York fan title bestowed upon one of their players because, of course, New York fans don't care about anything but New York stuff when it comes to sports. Derek Jeter, again, overblown, overrated, and there's no way his boring ass personality is going to make the Fox baseball studio show any better. Unless, of course, you want to compare it to Big Papi and Ozzie Guillen, who you can't even understand half the time. Then, of course, you got to worry about Big Papi getting assassinated during the show. Sorry. That was in bad taste. I apologize. Not. Now we move on to the NBA. Of course, we called it here. We knew this was coming a year or two down the road. The final nail in the coffin of the great and expensive experiment that was the Brooklyn Nets is officially done. The nails are in the coffin. It's blown up. It's imploded. Whatever you want to use as an analogy, it is over and it is done. They are left with Ben Simmons and a bunch of cast-offs after having Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden because Kevin Durant was traded to the Phoenix Suns. Now we'll see. Does this make the Suns the team to beat in the West? Does Kyrie Irving arriving in Dallas make the Mavericks a legitimate contender? Now, we touched on that last week. It's all about chemistry in the NBA. It's all about, have you got a coach who's got the right mix of letting the inmates run the asylum, but sneakily, subtly being able to impose his will on the team like a Steve Kerr or a Greg Popovich, even though I hate both of them with a passion, those two liberal dipshits. Monty Williams, can he blend Kevin Durant in with Chris Paul, with Devin Booker, with Ayton? A lot of people I've heard are saying that this makes the Suns the team to beat overall, and I disagree wholeheartedly. Have you seen what the Boston Celtics are doing? The Boston Celtics got over the controversy with their pervert head coach, who almost went, by the way, to the Brooklyn Nets because the Nets were so desperate to get somebody, anybody, to be able to lead Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They almost tried to trade for the disgraced, suspended head coach of the Boston Celtics. Well, guess what? The guy who came from behind, off the bench, to lead this current incarnation of the Boston Celtics, who, by the way, did not mess up the chemistry of that team one bit. They did not make any deals, did not make any trades, left things alone with Tatum, with Jalen Brown. They're the team to beat, in my opinion. And then right behind them is the Milwaukee Bucks. I think the West is a mess. The Warriors, you've got Steph Curry dealing with injuries. They're barely hanging on around 500. LeBron James, the general manager, again, has failed miserably. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, he's still playing. As the Lakers can't get out of their own way, they might not even make the play-in round of 4. But again, we have to acknowledge the greatness of the king. No, I don't. LeBron James is not even a top 10 player of all time. If he is, it's borderline. And Kevin Durant has destroyed his reputation and his credibility to the point where I don't even know if he would be considered a top 10 player of all time right now. I definitely put LeBron James ahead of Kevin Durant right now. And you all know how I feel about the king. And then finally, we talked about the Milwaukee Bucks briefly. They are a team that has been lucky in terms of being able to secure, draft one of the greatest players of the last decade, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Why would you even want to mess that up by bringing in the toxic owners of the Cleveland Browns? Yes, the Haslams want to buy in for 25% of the Milwaukee Bucks. You've already got Darkness Retreat Man himself, Aaron Rodgers, dating the daughter of the owner, the majority owner right now. Why would you want to bring in the Haslams in their stellar reputation as NFL owners to destroy what you've got going on with the Milwaukee Bucks, who've won one title? They're a likable team. Why do you want to destroy a good thing? College football. Texas and Oklahoma, of course, we know they are selling their souls to move to the SEC. But they have been bartering with the Big 12 to try to get out early. Well, it took $100 million, but there's always a price, right, kids? There is always a price. So for $100 million buyout, Texas and Oklahoma bump up their departure date. Leaving the Big 12 for the SEC will now take place July the 1st, 2024. So they have got, in terms of football, one more year left in the Big 12, and then they are on to getting their asses handed to them by Georgia and Alabama in the SEC. In terms of the teams that Dave and I root for, again, just like in college basketball, he roots for Notre Dame. I root for the Miami Hurricanes. news on both fronts. Now, I don't know if this was just posted late or didn't get a lot of attention, but now we talked about, of course, Tommy Rees leaving as offensive coordinator for the Fighting Irish to take the same job with the Alabama Crimson Tide, but I did not realize that the offensive line coach for Notre Dame, Harry Heistand, is also leaving. He's retiring. So another job, another crucial coaching position to fill for Marcus Freeman. Now, for my Miami Hurricanes, yes, it's still chaos after the first disappointing year with Mario Cristobal in charge. We talked last week about how they poached the defensive coordinator from Tulane, who had poached him from Marshall. Well, Charlie Strong, who was the co-defensive coordinator and the linebackers coach for the Hurricanes, did not take kindly to the fact that he did not get the defensive coordinator job, so he is leaving the program. Now, we also talked about the fact that Miami had ditched their offensive coordinator after one disappointing year. We talked about how Josh Gaddis a few weeks back was fired as the Hurricanes offensive coordinator. They bring in Shannon Dawson. He will be the new OC for the Hurricanes. He comes over from Houston, working with the quarterbacks and offensive coordinator with Houston. So hopefully this will shake things up for the Hurricanes. I mean, I can't tell you how unbelievably disappointing that initial season with Mario Cristobal was, to not even become bowl eligible. Very embarrassing, very disappointing year for the Hurricanes. Hopefully, healthy quarterback, new blood as the offensive coordinator position, the defensive coordinator position. They both flip, they both change hands. Hopefully, those guys will bring in some renewed vitality and a renewed sense of urgency, because if this goes south again for the Hurricanes this year, it's going to destroy recruiting. They have got to post a great season to make sure that they can recruit as well as they have been, because you can't keep eroding the legacy of the Hurricanes like this. You've got to post some 10-2, 9-3 seasons to keep the players interested, to keep their parents intrigued. Yes, they are getting players into the NFL, into the first round of the NFL draft, but at some point, it's going to erode without solid, dominant winning seasons. All right, kids, we're just about done. Couple more minutes left. I'm going to save most of my incorrect, awful, hurtful, nasty criticism for the weekend edition, because as I mentioned, that's where I'm going to talk about the Super Bowl ads and the halftime show. So don't have a lot of Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. We do have a couple moments of silence to talk about here. First up, Ted Lerner passed away here within the last few days. Ted Lerner was the owner of the Washington Nationals. And of course, if you're a fan of the Nationals, you know he brought baseball back to the Washington, D.C. area. after a long, long, long dry spell without baseball there. And, of course, give him credit for at least bankrolling, if not putting together the team a few years ago that ended up winning the World Series, of course, spearheaded by one Max Scherzer. And then, of course, I don't know how many of you out there, older people like me, will remember this name. Younger people won't even know what I'm talking about when I talk about the St. Louis Cardinals. They're going to think I'm misspeaking. Cardinals are in Arizona, right? St. Louis had the Rams, but then they lost them to Los Angeles. Well, it used to be, yes, the Los Angeles Rams were around back in the 70s. But the Cardinals were in St. Louis, and they had two of the greatest offensive linemen, in my opinion, of all time. Of course, Dan Dierdorf, and the self-proclaimed dirtiest offensive lineman of all time, Conrad Dobler. Conrad Dobler passed away here within the last couple days. I know we shouldn't probably be celebrating a guy who said he was a dirty player, but I'm telling you, that Cardinals offensive line anchored by Dierdorf and Dobler, they were nasty. Jim Hart was a quarterback. They had some great, great players on that team. And of course, with the shifting and the changing of the franchises, we all know how things ended up. But Conrad Dobler, again, he won't get in the Hall of Fame. But he was a memorable player in the down and dirty days of the NFL in the 70s when the referees didn't interfere. And it was a tough, tough, mean game. As opposed to the snowflake game we're getting now where the Pro Bowl is flag football and you barely tug on a guy's jersey in the Super Bowl and you get called for an unbelievably crucial defensive holding call, but I'm not bitter. And finally, my one lone dumbass of the week, the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. And I feel bad about this one because this is a guy who I just had propped up last week as my Clint Eastwood badass of the week. Didn't have one this week here on the sports side of things. But last week it was Cam Thomas of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, as you recall last week when we were talking about Cam Thomas with all the chaos that we were just talking about with Kevin Durant and with Kyrie Irving, Cam Thomas was the guy that stepped up and became the youngest player ever to score 40 or more points in 3 straight games, trying to navigate the Nets through the egotistical quagmire that Durant and Kyrie Irving had put them into. Well, unfortunately, Cam Thomas ruined all of it. Cam Thomas gets fined $40,000 by the league, and rightfully so, for a dumbass anti-gay remark. I read the exchange. It was something to do with, again, with all the personnel shifting in and out of the Brooklyn Nets locker room. Somebody said something about good-looking players. I don't know if it was Spencer Dinwiddie who's come back to the Nets. One of the guys that was traded away to start the whole superstar rebuild a few years back. But somebody said something about, well, now that I'm back, it's a better looking locker room. Something along those lines. Definitely paraphrasing here. So, of course, Cam Thomas has to come out and say, yeah, he's probably right. But that's no homo remark here. That's an exact quote. No homo. Can we get over that? Can we just get over that? It's not, number one, it's stupid. It's a stupid, stupid comment. But can we get over the fact that a guy can't say another guy is good looking without worrying about being perceived as being a homosexual? Jesus God. The way I look at it is you are more secure in your masculinity if you can say another guy is good looking than if you have to resort to this kind of crap like Cam Thomas did, where you got to qualify it and say, but I'm not a homo. And again, I know it's an explicit mark on this podcast. These are not my words. These are Cam Thomas's words, and that's why he is the one lone solo, big time Red Foreman dumbass of the week. So again, hope you have a great VD day. Catch it. Catch the love fever, kids. Dave will be back next week. Check out the weekend edition. I'm the Maestro. Take care, everybody.